In the model of the mind from an IFS lens, there's 3 different types of parts that we can work to heal. So we have the exile. You've heard that term already a few times. Just to give more language to that, exiles are injured parts. They're often like the inner children of insufficiency in us. So when children feel shamed, for example, they have these overwhelming beliefs that then develop, like I'm unlovable or I'm worthless. These parts that come up that are self-shaming, self-loathing. They're the opposite of belly thoughts. They're the opposite of self thoughts, like I am whole, I am love, I am here, I am full. So you could say exiles are like the farthest from self-energy. They're the farthest from the center line, from the center self. So it's the deepest work to go all the way out into the exiles. And there's a great deal of internal energy that's expended to keep exiles out of the picture usually, to keep these overwhelming thoughts and patterns from flooding the system so that we don't experience emotional overwhelm or the same kind of grief or shame or pain that we were exposed to enough times in our past for that exile to really develop. So if we hear, you're bad or you messed up once or twice, we, at that stage in our development, might have the inner resources to let that through and be porous enough to not let that imprint. But over time, if we're hearing that again and again, particularly when we're in a vulnerable state or in a trusting state with the caretaker, let's say, then we learn to close down the area in us that's being hit by the blow of that impact. And so the vulnerable regions of our psyche that are inherently trusting and loving and curious and childlike and kind and caring and adventurous start to harden. And this is what Pema Chodron calls our armor. Those are the exiles that get buried into the deepest recesses of our being, because exposing that level of vulnerability and openness we've learned has been damaging. So then we build these protector parts around the exiles to keep the exiles from being felt in the system. Protectors, the exiles close down in response to interpersonal injury. Protectors come in and they form productivity or these managerial roles that keep us moving forward rather than being curled in the fetal position in exiled, vulnerable, traumatized terror state. Protectors can keep us moving forward. So we have these proactive protectors, we call them managers. They focus on functioning, being prepared and stable. They're vigilant in trying to keep exiles from being triggered, in trying to keep that same type of interpersonal or emotional pain from coming back up to the surface to break the skin again. And they use a variety of tactics to do that. So they can self-criticize, they can be shaming, they can be controlling, they can keep us really task-oriented, really mission-driven, they can be perfectionists. We have like those OCD parts that keep us impervious to difficult feelings. If I'm doing a good job at work, I won't feel this overwhelming sense of being a failure. If I stay as this really likable social butterfly, then I won't have to feel that deep loneliness of not being acknowledged, by my parents at the dinner table, or feeling alone in the middle of the night. So the protectors, those proactive protectors, keep us. They're the ones we're trying to relax away from in noble silence. The ones that work so hard to keep us sociable and thriving and doing a good job so that we are a valued member of the pack animal tribe. So just get a feel for that for a moment, that these parts are super benevolent. They have a really, really beautiful aspiration to keep us away from harm, to keep us out of the way of negative feelings or re-traumatizing the system. But their intention can often be misguided because they don't have the bandwidth to host difficult emotion. Only self has that space to really host difficult emotion. So the managers, the proactive protectors, are like managing our life to keep things moving forward, to keep us, not just overburdened by pain and sorrow. They motivate us to improve. They plan steps that we need to take. But at the extreme, those tactics can start to devolve, and then we get into perfectionism and obsessing or avoiding conflict at all costs or trying to control others or trying to please others. Like the people pleaser part is a really strong proactive protector. And then we have the reactive protectors, which is sometimes called firefighters. They share the same goal as proactive protectors. They want to exile vulnerable parts and extinguish emotional pain. But they are like the emergency response workers. So they get activated when our exiles have been triggered. When this deep emotional pain, these what we call like original wounds, like the core wounds that have been inflicted upon us in childhood, usually when we haven't had the resources to meet what's here and feel safe, or we trusted other authorities rather than self because we hadn't developed a relationship yet. So when those exiles get triggered, there's the repressive efforts of the managers all the time. Like, no, calm down, everything's fine. Put your force field here, or focus on this, or keep moving forward, right? Those managers repress, like panic. But when that effort isn't successful, firefighters come in because they tend to be more fierce, more aggressive, and use extreme measures. Like putting out a fire, it doesn't really matter what damage happens to the whole structure as long as the fire that's happening right now is out. So you can, take the whole system down so long as you don't feel that certain burst of trauma. So firefighters are the parts that tend to get into things like substance abuse or violence, When nothing else works, anger turns into violence as a way to keep us safe in some sense. So that's a firefighter that's flooding in to keep us safe. But it can turn into, self-harm and sabotage. It can be excessive, it can be erratic, it can be damaging. They're trying to stop emotional pain as fast as possible. Dull out, disassociate, or, drink, or whatever it is. The firefighters view their actions, if you really have a earnest conversation with a fierce firefighter, the sentiment tends to be the same as like a life-saving medicine. It's like we're not really at that point interested or concerned about the side effects. Like if you need it, use it. If you need to get, press the panic button, do it. Does that make sense?
In some ways they're controllers.
Right. Both types of protectors, I would say, are trying to control the inner tone from being aggressive or aggressive isn't the right word, but damaging, scary, painful. It's just that proactive protectors are trying to do it in a more managerial, maybe more mundane day-to-day thing. Whereas firefighters flood in when those managers haven't been successful in suppressing the exile from being felt. So, likely, all of the parts that you've listed on the map are protectors. And the only way to get to real healing, which is going to be healing the exile, right? Because the protectors are just working for the protection of the exile's pain. So to really make deep excavation in parts, we have to work with the protectors. We can't bypass them. They've been working hard for many, many years, most likely, to keep us from feeling emotional pain. So it's not like in IFS we go straight to the core wound and go to the part that was abused as a child. We go to the parts that have built up around that abuse, around original wounds, and see how much work they've been doing and what they need, and develop a relationship self to part. So they feel safe, so they feel resourced, so they don't feel so gripped in their role, like this burden that they've been holding for so long to keep us feeling stable. When they recognize the resource that's inherent, when they have access to hara, they start to soften. And then we can actually find that young inner child beneath that just wants to be loved, all of us, just wants to feel safe, cared for.